So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, friends. So many familiar faces and many new faces as well in Germany and India and all over the place, USA, Australia. Well, you said that this is a co-creative experience, Kelly. I'm grateful to be able to seed a conversation which I know will be co-creative. I would be fortunate to have 5% of the picture of what the new paradigm of business looks like. I have a lot of intuitive feeling for it, and the more I look, the more I see. But if I have, let's say, 5%, I know that this group collectively has around 45%. That's the number that comes to me, so I'll run with that. 9 times multiplier. So I would like to share a vision that I've been holding for humanity and specifically for what business can be. And my sense is not in some distant future, but in the relatively near term. So imagine a world filled with purpose-guided and deeply aware organizations that are making a noble contribution to society that is in alignment with life. These organizations and their leaders honor their employees, their customers, their communities, and the planet. And the feelings of appreciation and respect are mutual. In short, this is a world of awakened, loving organizations. And I do want to emphasize the word loving because, well, somebody named Daniel Priestley, who wrote a book called Key Person of Influence, said, if your business isn't talking about love in a few years' time, you won't be in business. And I know that's true. I feel it deeply in my bones. So we're finding the skillful ways to bring love into our workplaces and into all aspects of our lives more fully, and certainly in our relationships with the environment, which are calling for a much higher degree of reverence actually at this time. So the pandemic is one signal that we could be paying a lot more attention to well-being holistically, not just a certain number of bottom lines. So in reflecting this morning on this vision and in the opportunity today to explore planning and strategy in a new way, I remembered a passage from a book by a friend of mine. This book is called Love Money, Money Loves You. And it's a wonderful transmission of money actually saying, hey, we could have a very different relationship. So imagine if business were in this circle today saying, let's talk about me and how great we could be. So in this case, the message has to do with planning. And I will read you a few paragraphs. Through your daily practice, you are learning how to flow and how to move step by step without knowing what is coming next. This is very important, as much of the coming years you will feel blind. You will only be able to trust by the strength of your enjoyment and by a sense of fulfillment and inner satisfaction that will tell you again and again that what you are doing must be right, even if you don't know where it is leading. Your old style of planning will fail you in the new world. You must prepare yourself. Remember, those who walk forward in enjoyment and pleasure will know at all times that they are going in the right direction, although they will often not know what that direction is. Those who are serious and have not learned the new way will feel totally disoriented, confused, and afraid because their feelings will not give them any inner guidance. So take this time now to learn to walk step by step through life, trusting without knowing the direction. Use your feelings of enjoyment as your compass, guiding you infallibly towards a bright future. This is very interesting for a number of reasons, not least of which it's money talking to us, but the idea that something in us knows, something is deeply wise and can guide us, and that it's a feeling in particular of enjoyment. So when we're engaged in activities that we love, deeply love, it's much more likely that they're aligned with life. And the sense of fulfillment is a reliable guide that whatever we're doing fits into the larger mandala of life in a way that is right, synergistic. So we come together with others who are similarly aligning themselves based on purpose and their felt sense of enjoyment. And somehow life works better. Now, this has been my experience, and I've worked with quite a few organizations and individuals, for-profit organizations, nonprofit organizations, hybrid social enterprises that are exploring new ways of being and working. And actually, yesterday in meditation, I'd already mapped out this talk and I had many good ideas, but I was inspired to ask the question, what is awakened structure and planning? If that's what we're talking about today, what is awakened structure and planning? And three key ideas came to me. And I'll share with you after this time together today, the presentation. So you don't necessarily need to take notes unless you like to do that. So the first of the points, the key points, is intuition is integrated into decision-making. So we're not leaving behind the left brain and analysis and all of that good stuff. However, increasingly, we're bringing our whole selves and multiple intelligences and ways of knowing into the process of discernment, of attuning to the way forward. So we're invited to synthesize, in particular, our inner and outer ways of listening. So if you're listening to your sense, your felt sense of enjoyment, that is a way of accessing intuition. You can listen to your heart, you can listen to your gut, and it is a kind of listening. And when we do that with as much devotion as we think about things, analytically and numerically, and like I said, that's fun too. As a math person, I love numbers and I love crisp logic, but I discovered pretty early on that math didn't have the answers to the questions I was most interested in, and nevertheless, those answers were available. So we're bringing our inner and our outer listening together and our multiple ways of knowing. So you can imagine now the left brain and the right brain are coming together into a whole brain, a holistic process of sensing and deepening, settling into clarity, really. And so we have to give ourselves the time and the space also to become clear. There's a wonderful part of the Tao Te Ching that talks about becoming clear and settling, and then the way is obvious. And it's also very important, I found, that we have a commitment to act from wholeness and alignment. So as we're coming together into a whole person and a whole mind and a whole being, let's make sure that we're also aligning with the larger whole of planetary being and with life itself. So again, the first point, intuition, is integrated into our decision-making process. And the second point is that there is alignment with the processes of life. So what is life? Life is big, seems quite abstract, but life actually has a pattern and a destiny that we can discern. So again, in meditation yesterday, I asked the question, what is the pattern of life? Because if we understand that, then maybe the decisions we make are instantly much clearer, because we know the pattern that would work best to fit into. So one, life is becoming more and more complex. That's pretty clear. It doesn't need to be overwhelming, though. What the complexity does is it creates more vehicles, more ways of relating to one another, more forms and structures that can express consciousness, that can express our creativity. And amidst this profusion of complexity, the guiding principle is stay simple. Find the simple way forward. Design for simplicity. And simplicity turns out to be a design principle for higher consciousness systems. And then there's also a destiny for life. And teleology was roundly dismissed in earlier traditions of philosophy, but it's coming back. And Teilhard de Chardin talks about the omega point. Where is this all leading? Well, I would offer maximum diversity and maximum freedom and maximum interdependence. We don't have maximum freedom without maximum interdependence. It's not even paradoxical, it's just how it works. So when we're building our organizations, are we building them with diversity in mind? Are we celebrating diversity? Are we intending that the economic structures we create be liberating structures that reinforce social connectivity and well-being? So that second principle is aligning with the processes of life. And the third principle is that organizations are evolving to know themselves as nature. This is a bit of a leap from paying attention to more than profit. And there's a sense of a trajectory, and it might take a while, but we start with connecting. So we're reconnecting with the communities we operate in. We're reconnecting with the natural world, paying attention, making sure not to have externalities where we're ignoring the downsides of the way we operate and creating negative environmental impacts. We don't have to design systems that do that, but if we're connected, we'll naturally be paying attention and correct our behaviors when we discover that they're damaging. And the more connected, the more interconnected we are, the more we discover that we are interbeing with one another. We cannot exist without those around us, without complex ecosystems that feed us and that nourish us in every conceivable way. And then when we really deepen into this interbeingness and appreciate that we can't even draw a line between any two people or beings, like the field, our energy field, extends far beyond what we can see with the eyes. So the separation is imaginary, and we realize we're interpenetrating with one another. And that brings us to the insight and the knowingness of oneness, that ultimately we're not separate with nature, we are nature. And imagine building a business that knows it is nature. It's not some artificial construct, it's an extension of nature. Earth has extended herself through people into all of these forms. Computers, the Dalai Lama said, it's technically possible to reincarnate into a computer. You know, some wild ideas we could play with, but oneness, it's all alive, and we're it. So I would like to share with you now a slide. I don't want to overdo it with the slides, but let's see if I can at least do it. All right, something I've discovered on this path of exploring what is an awakened organization, making awakened decisions and strategies in alignment with life. If we started off once upon a time, way back when, with the easy decisions, very, very simple businesses, those decisions would be automatic in nature. And there would be best practices, like you would know always to do the certain thing, whatever it is. Like if the water is running, you turn the faucet off. That's what I mean, it's obvious. And then we have complicated systems. Like anyone who's filed a tax return in the USA knows that's complicated, but with intellectual training, you can do it. And there are good practices. There's not only one way, but there's definitely a better way, which is to go ahead and file your taxes. And then we have more complex systems. And this requires evolved decision-making because we realize that we're implicated in the system itself. In this complexity, which we are part of, we no longer have straight, simple cause and effect. We can't even say there are best and good practices. There are emergent practices. We'll discover how the system responds as we experiment. So now we're getting into the realm of experimentation. And then we come to the realm of chaos. So in this pandemic, in this black swan time, we can't rely on what we have known before. And cause and effect seem to have nothing to do with one another. And I would hypothesize that that's why we see so much confusion and quote fake news, that something is shifting in consciousness that's calling us to operate in a very different way. And we need inspired decision making. And this also is a realm of novelty, actual new ideas that have never existed before come through inspiration. So I would like to also honor where this model came from, at least in part. There's something called the Kinnivan framework, which gets into a lot more detail than I'm sharing today. But you can think of business in terms of the right side of this picture, which is obvious and complicated systems, which we're pretty good at. And we've learned how to do things over and over again in repeatable, reliable ways. But the left side of this diagram, we're not very good at. We're not really good at complex systems. We're not good at all, or we haven't been. I hope that will change, at chaotic systems. But these times that we live in are VUCA times. That means volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So there is an evolution in consciousness that is occurring where we're being pulled forward into new capacities to discern the way forward by partnering with emergence and the word emergence, if we were to really dive into it, is a whole long conversation, but there's a sense that we're really dancing with novelty, with the creative spark of life. And in the process of this dance, which is a back and forth, something comes through that we could never have predicted. So there are emergent qualities. And on the left side, we also learn to navigate beyond the knowns and the clear cause and effect of life. Now, one implication of the left side, and I get, by the way, when I kind of tune in, that society is now pretty firmly in the complex quadrant. No wonder we're confused. So let's just relax and remember that we'll find the way forward through our sense of enjoyment, and we'll have many opportunities to practice and get better. But one strategy, which I know will not work at this new level of consciousness that we're moving into, is having some fixed idea of where we're going, some fixed outcome that we design towards and around. I've seen time and again with clients that when we do that, the whole system grinds to a halt. But when we open up to having multiple possible positive outcomes, then things do work out in one way or another, but not predictably. So I'd like to stop sharing my screen and say very briefly the method that I use, which Kelly mentioned early on, which is resonance mapping. Some years ago, I began to notice in my body a feeling that corresponded to yes. And whenever I had that feeling, being the scientist, I turned it into a hypothesis. Whenever I had that feeling, I would test to see if the outcome was satisfactory. And I discovered that when I followed this feeling and kept doing what felt tingly and warm, a kind of rising energy sensation in the spine, life worked better. Not in ways that I could predict or control, but life flowed. I felt more joy, again, enjoyment. Pay attention to what really brings you delight and do more of that. And business worked better. This was 10 years ago, so it was before the new wave of business was really rolling in. But nevertheless, now it clearly is working, I have to say, and not just for me, but for organizations that I've been on the board of that have transformed completely in the last few years, and even during the pandemic, are soaring and getting new business all around the world, but not because there was a very finite idea of where to go. In fact, we had to relax our ideas. So in this resonance mapping process, I get that feeling, but then I also use my gut, you could say, to put a number to the felt sense of resonance. Is it a 5? Is it an 8? Is it a 10? That was the original scale. I used 0 through 10. And then I would take this list that was produced in the process, because I would try to map all the possibilities and then give all the possibilities a number. And then using a spreadsheet, I would reorder the list so that the highest resonating items were at the top. And that gave me a game plan. Do that first, or at least explore that first. And it works with groups. I had one excellent experience in India with the entire leadership team of a company in Mumbai that was really struggling. And so we went around the table and we named the opportunities and the challenges, and everybody gave them a number. And we did some numerical analysis, averages and standard deviations. Again, I'm a math guy too. And what came out was a picture of where the organization is coherent, where it's not coherent, and where the energy seems to be moving. And the result was an advertising campaign that got top marks in the industry. And they were trying to think their way to, should they have their focus be on honesty or on low price? And there was not agreement in the circle until we did resonance mapping. They chose honesty, and it seems to have turned the company around. Maybe other factors as well, but that was a great experience. So resonance mapping also merits a much longer conversation, but see if you can feel in your body or in your gut that yes, and then make a map of all the yeses and see if you can quantify the degree of aliveness, and then systematically focus on what's most alive. Now you're partnering with life, and that's a good idea. So there's a new way, I would call it the bold new way, and that is to start with the premise that life is in charge, and to recognize that nature bats last. So if you're in America and you know something about baseball, whichever team is up at the bottom of the 9th inning has an advantage because they can potentially score the final runs. I don't know how that might map into cricket or some other sport, but the idea is nature has the final say. And we would do very well to respect nature and pay attention to the many indications of how we can be in a better partnership with the natural world, because Earth is telling us all the time. And if we can listen to our gut, we can listen to Earth. So a path to success in the new paradigm is to listen inwardly and outwardly, and to observe very carefully, to empty the mind to the extent that that's feasible, and without judgment, just notice. Notice the patterns. And the left brain enters in here and loves to see the patterns. That's actually a lot of what it can do best. And then use your other faculties to sense and align with how life is moving. And as we get better at sensing and aligning, then we actually become better co-creators as well. And we're co-creating with life in the process. And we're better able to co-create with one another because we're naturally in a state of greater harmony. And with practice and meditation and deepening, we realize that we are life, living into its potential, which is a joyful exponentiation of creativity and complexity and simplicity at the same time. There's a wonderful quote about the simplicity on the other side of complexity. So let us not be daunted by the complexity that we see in the world. Embrace it, relax into it, and know that there is something very beautiful that's being formed. If we don't see it yet, we can feel our way there step by step. And in the process, we can love. And we will succeed holistically, and we will, I reckon, enjoy the journey. So I want to thank you for your attention and your care about this topic, because it is certainly one of the most important explorations that we could be in today. And before long, we will be on the other side of the pandemic. I have a sense that we're shifting from an old pattern to a new pattern. And very specifically in June, July, that seems to be the inflection point. So now is the right time to be having this conversation. It'll take a few months for the beautiful new beginnings to emerge. But as we invest our energy and our love, our joy, our creativity into these themes and into working with one another and being really curious about what's possible, we will be creating the new world that works for all. So thank you very much.